Hi, I'm Rashonda. I'm the creator of artbyro.com as well as this channel. I'm glad you're here today. If you're new, welcome. And if you're returning, welcome back. Either way, I'm glad you're here and I hope you enjoy this tutorial today. What we're going to do today is to draw a flaming heart, but the heart's going to be a little bit different. We're going to make it a little bit stylized, a little crazy. So we're going to call this a crazy flaming heart. And I hope you follow along and enjoy the video. If you do, don't forget to subscribe so you get notified of future videos, and leave us a like. It helps the channel grow so we can reach more people. Let's go ahead and go on over to the art studio and get started. Okay, in today's video we're going to be drawing a flaming heart. And if you've watched any of my other videos, then you may know that I like to start with some basic guidelines, some simple shapes. And we're going to do that today, even though a heart is fairly simple. Most of us are familiar with drawing hearts. But it helps us to get everything where we want it. It helps to get over that blank page syndrome where you have a hard time getting started. And also, the heart today is going to be a little bit stylized. It's not going to be just your typical standard type of a heart. So I want this side of the heart to be slightly bigger than this side. So I'm going to draw two circles, and I'm going to have this circle slightly larger. And then for the point of my heart, I want it to curve down this way. So I'm going to draw a curved line there, and then normally I would make a triangle for my heart. Your triangle would go straight through the circles, straight down to the point. Well, like I said, we're going to make this heart a little bit stylized, a little crazy looking. And also, I want to point out that I am doing my drawing on an artist trading card, which I make myself. I cut them out of, this is a heavy cardstock paper, and then I use a corner punch to round off the corners. And I like doing these because eventually I do end up trading the cards that I make, but until I'm ready to trade them, they stay in a binder and they kind of act like a nice little portfolio. So just something to keep in mind, but you can do this on any type of paper. It doesn't matter. And the reason I started doing the artist trading cards is because I always had stacks of drawings everywhere, and it kind of seemed like a waste. Like they were just sitting around not doing anything. So I decided to start doing my drawings on artist trading cards. Okay, so here's the basic shape of the heart. Now we're going to start giving it a little bit of style to it. So I want, this is going to come down here. I'm going to overlap these two areas. And then I'm going to make these, I don't know if you want to call them little like spikes coming off of it. I'm going to make this heart looking a little bit crazier than a normal heart. And of course, you want to make sure you're keeping your lines fairly light so you can go back and erase if needed, clean things up a little bit. This click eraser works really well for getting in these small areas. You can get a more detailed erase going, and they make them even smaller than this one, which is nice for smaller drawings. But that's the one I use most often in my drawings so I can see what I'm doing. Okay, so I'm going to bring that around here. And as you can see, I'm curving them around. I have a lot of overlaps going on. I'm going to bring another one here. Bring this around. And you can erase as you go if it's helpful to see what you got going on underneath there.
It's not really necessary, but it does help sometimes, so you can see what you're keeping and what you don't need. And then I think I'm going to start on this one over here. And I'm following this curve of that circle to keep that shape how I want it. Bring that down here. I'm going to just keep doing the same thing I did on this other side. I think I want this to come out a little bit more. And I'm just looking at how the shapes work together, making changes as needed. I don't want them to be all the same. I want there to be a little bit of variation of how they curve around. And then I'm going to make this come down here like that. And then I am going to erase some of this because this is getting in the way of me seeing where I want to go with this. So I want this to come around like that. This is going to come down here. So we're making it look a bit crazy. It's a little bit of a crazy heart. But we also want to make sure the overall shape of it still looks like a heart. And then we're going to add some flames coming out of the top of it. So as you're drawing, look at all the different areas. Like I said, you want to make sure it still looks like a heart, but we're also adding some style to it instead of just doing a normal boring type heart, which you could do flames on any type of heart, of course. So I think that's good for that part of it. So now we need to draw some flames. All right, so the flames are going to just come off the top. We're going to keep this pretty simple. And when I make these videos, my goal is to give you a starting point to work off of. I want to give you those first steps to get you going. I hear a lot of people, one of the biggest struggles that somebody working on their artwork seems to have is getting started, what to draw, where do I begin? So I like to give you something easy to start with to get you started. Just so you can take those first steps, start working on some artwork, and then you can go from there and expand and get it as advanced or crazy as you want. So what I'm doing for the flames, you want to keep your lines curved. And I'm also making sure that they're not all the same. I want the heights to be different. I want the thickness to be different. I want the way that they curve around to be different. The biggest thing is just to make sure everything's curved. You don't want any straight lines on these. You want them all to have nice flow to them and curve around. So we're just gonna have some flames come up here, come around and connect to the heart. So there we go. That's it for the drawing. And now we need to add an outline.
So for the outline, I like to use these Sharpie pens. This is a black medium tip. They also come in, this is a fine tip, and this is a pink color. You can use markers, you can use pens, you could just do this as a pencil drawing. Whatever it is you want to do for your artwork, I like these pens. Even when I do a thicker outline, I'll use this because I like how nice and crisp the edges are. But you should do whatever is comfortable for you. You do not have to do your outline in black. You do not have to do it at all, really, if you don't want to add an outline to it. It depends on the overall look that you're going for and how you want your finished drawing to be. Part of my style of my drawings that I do is the black outline. So that's just something that I do on my drawings. It doesn't mean that I'll always do it that way, but right now that's what I do. So what I'll do to thicken it is to just keep going over it, getting a little wider, going out a little bit further. And this could seem tedious to some of you, but I personally find it to be very relaxing. For whatever reason, it's therapeutic for me. So I don't mind that I'm using a thinner pen and going over it multiple times because I enjoy this process probably the most out of everything in the process of drawing. This is the part that I really enjoy. It's maybe because you don't have to think too much. You just go over it, but I don't know. For whatever reason, this is relaxing to me, so I don't mind that I have to go over it multiple times. But like I said, if that's something that feels very tedious to you and you don't enjoy it, or if it makes you nervous for whatever reason, if you think you're gonna mess your lines up, then you can use a marker. I will show you another option. So these markers have a bullet tip, and they work pretty good for outlining. What I don't like is that they make it kind of fuzzy. Those markers are alcohol-based markers, and the alcohol will saturate the paper or will soak into the paper, and your markers will bleed a little bit. So when you're adding your color, it's not very noticeable, but in something like an outline, you will notice, or you may notice, I notice it looks a little bit fuzzy. So I prefer to use the pen because it leaves a nice sharp edge. So that's how I do the heart. Well, I can also go in and add some shading in here with this pen if I want. This gives it a nice little effect of creating a bit more depth where these pieces overlap. And this is optional. You don't have to do this. Again, it goes into that whatever your overall style is and the look you're going for. Sometimes I do this and sometimes I don't. It just depends on really the mood that I'm in. Typically, I do think it looks better if you add a little bit of shading in there. It gives it some nice variation to it.
And then also, of course, we want to outline the flames. And for the flames, we want to try to get a nice smooth outline to it. So just following right along the pencil lines. And then, after we get everything outlined, we can take a block eraser and just go over top of everything and erase all of this. Now, if you have room on your paper, you can make these flames come up bigger. You could do more flames. You could do flames around the whole thing. A lot of different options you can do. Let me move that out of the way so you can see that a little bit better. So that's it for the outline. And then the next step is, of course, to add some color. So we'll get some markers and be back with those. All right, so I got some markers for the heart. And typically I like to use at least 2 colors and sometimes 3. And what I do is I test them on these little scrap cards. These are left over from when I cut out my artist trading cards. And then I can check the markers on there to see if they're going to go together. And what I'm looking for is that the colors are similar enough that they're going to blend and not leave a real hard edge. If your markers are too different, then they're not going to blend. But if they're close enough together, you can blend them and they'll have more of a gradual, like a gradation instead of a hard transition of color. And then what I like to do is put down my lightest color first. And you don't have to do this. This is just the way that I like to work. A lot of this is going to get covered up. But I feel like by doing this, even though I know some of these areas are going to get covered, I have more control over how much of it shows through and how much of it I cover up. Where if I did my lightest color last, then I'm limited to whatever I chose when I first started for how I'm going to do my coverage of it. So this way I can decide as I go how much area I'm going to cover. So then you do this will be my middle value. And then what I do is I go back over that edge with my lighter color. And as you can see, I have different brands. This is just a plain Bic marker. These are Prismacolors, and the ones you've seen earlier were touch markers. And most of these I've had for over 10 years. And they're still working. The reason I have a lot of different brands is that when I first started out using markers, which it's been about maybe 15 years ago now, when I first started out, I experimented quite a bit with different brands to see which ones I liked and if it really made a difference or not. And I just have my supply of everything that I got when I was experimenting with them. And unless you're using the color a lot, they last a long time. So like I said, these I've had for at least 10 years, probably closer to 15 years, and they have not dried out. And I even had taken a break for quite some time and wasn't working on much artwork, and they just sat and they're still fine. So markers are a little bit of an investment because you do need to have quite a few different colors. But I think it's worth it. For me it was anyway. And like I said, they last a long time. So even though you have to get a lot of different colors, you don't have to worry about them drying out just sitting there if you're not using them. So that's nice to know. But so all I'm doing is picking areas that I want to be lighter or darker. And then I also have one that's darker than that red. It's kind of a brick red color that I'm going to go over some darker areas. And you can work back and forth with these and decide where you want to add darker color and what areas you want to leave lighter. So you can just go back and forth. One thing I will caution you on, if you're using an off-brand marker, I found out my experience was that when you use the cheap craft store markers, they do tend to oversaturate the paper and your markers will end up bleeding all over the place and going where you don't want them to go. So know your markers, test them out, work with them a little bit. And the markers don't all work the same. They don't all perform in the same way. So I've not had any problems with the name brand markers, but the cheap markers was where I had some trouble with them. So I just added in some darker areas with this. It's like a brownish red. It's a Tuscan red. It's kind of like reminds me of a brick color. And then I can go in and blend. That color actually blends pretty good. But you can keep going back and forth. And this it'll bleed through. That's why I have this on here for the edges and also to absorb whatever bleeds through so it doesn't get on the table. So that's pretty much it for the heart itself. So let's go ahead and move on to the flames. So for the colors for the flames, I did the same thing. I have 3 different markers that I tested to see how they go together. So one thing I do know is that I don't have the perfect colors for flames. I know this from my past drawings that I've done. And this is where you run into a bit of trouble with your markers, in that you need a broad range of each color. So even though I have probably 10 to 15 different oranges, none of them are the exact perfect orange that I need to transition from the yellow to the orange. So you either need to spend more money and buy more markers, or you need to just be okay with things not being 100% perfect in the way you would like them to be. So since I've already invested quite a bit of money in markers, I choose to just let it be what it is for now. Because the problem is you can buy more markers and not necessarily have the perfect color still. So sometimes you have to make do. You can get I've gotten these cheap sets of Bic marker, or cheap compared to the some of the name brands or the higher end brands, but the problem with the Bic markers is that when a color runs out, you have to buy a whole set. And what I found was that there were certain colors that I used quite a bit more than others. And then that marker would run out. And if you run out partway through a drawing, depending on what other markers you have available to you, you need that same exact marker. If you're halfway through and it dries up, then you either are going to ruin your drawing or you have to find a replacement or that same marker. So what happens with the Bic markers with the sets is that you have to keep buying more and more of the same set to get the same colors, and then you have a bunch of a color you don't use that much, and you keep running out of the color that you use more often. So it's better if you can find markers that come in individual, I think they call it like open stock, where you can buy just individual markers, which is good if you know the color that you need, the exact marker that you need, then you can just buy that one single marker, which is nice. But it's usually more expensive to buy individual markers. It's usually discounted if you buy a set. So the cost can add up, but what you can do is buy a nice set of markers, and then you know which colors you want, and then you can buy them individually after that. So that's an option. So that's usually what I try to do now, is look more for markers that you can buy the open stock individual colors. It seems to be a better choice. So these markers that I use aren't too bad. The only thing I don't care for is that the darkest color I would like to be a little bit darker. But I do know my marker that I have is darker than this. It doesn't blend very well, so we'll leave that as is. So here's the flames. Move that out of the way for you. So there's the heart with the flames, and now we need to do something for the background. So I will be back to work on the background as soon as I grab some more markers. All right, so I decided on doing some brown designs in the background using brown. So I have a few different markers. For this, the way that I'm doing it, I'm just going to do some kind of an abstract background. So I don't necessarily need a specific number of markers. I just grabbed a few to get some different values in there. I might do some of the fine liner details in there too. So I am going to do a time lapse for this. There isn't a whole lot I can say to explain what I'm doing. You'll see in the video, but I'm just going to put down the lighter color, fill in the background, and then I'm just going to do some abstract kind of scribbles over the top. So I'm going to speed this up, and I'll be back when the background's finished. I added some scribbles in the background, just making an abstract background design. And then I use this white jelly roll to add some white over the top. And I'm also going to use this to add just a few highlights in the flames and then also in the heart. I like using these jelly roll pens. They go nicely over the markers. You do have to wait for the markers to dry for that alcohol to evaporate. Or if you don't, then what happens is it'll absorb into the paper because the paper itself will be damp. And if that happens, it's not a big deal. You just wait a little bit longer and do it again. So I'm just adding a few highlights in here just to break up all this solid space of color. And this is optional. You don't have to do this at all. I like adding a few little highlights in there, just like I said, to break it up some. But optional. If you like how the white highlights look, you can add them. If not, leave them off. The choice is yours. But that's it for today. So this is our crazy flaming heart. I hope you enjoyed this video. Happy creating!
That's it for today's video. I hope you feel inspired to make some of your own crazy flaming heart drawings. Don't forget to check out the description box. There's a freebie in there for artist trading cards. It's a beginner's guide on how to get started. And there's a template in there that shows you how you can get 10 individual cards out of one sheet of paper. So that's pretty helpful. And also, if you have any questions, if something wasn't clear in the video, please leave a comment and I'll be sure to check that out and respond. And make sure you like and subscribe. It helps us out and you'll get notified of future videos. I will see you in the next one. Bye!